How are we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to our Season 6 Week 13 NCAA recap show, where your Panthers are coming off a 20-13 loss at the hands of the North Carolina Tar Heels. And it was one where it's been a problem all year long, and turnovers did the Panthers in yet again. We did force the first turnover on the day, but we end up with 3 total turnovers in the game, contributing to our loss. So a tough go of it for the Panthers, of course. 20-13, we end up falling to North Carolina. It was a very fun football game nonetheless. I love when we get to have a bit of a defensive battle as opposed to some of the high-scoring affairs that we've had throughout the season. So it's nice to see that change of pace in the gameplay and how with the same set of sliders you can get so many varied results. So that was so much fun to see. Both teams held under 300 yards of total offense. Both teams under 50% on conversions. Funny enough, it says in the red zone, North Carolina was over 100% in the red zone because it gave them 2 touchdowns on one red zone trip because their guy got pushed out at the pylon. It didn't give him a touchdown. He ended up scoring again. I mean, neither team hit 20 first downs. It was really impressive how fun the game played out. Of course, the turnovers are what killed us in this one. C.J. Kirk, 2 interceptions, a little bit of a regression from him. 1 interception over the middle, trying to find Jake. He's just tried to make something happen. The other one was ridiculous. It shouldn't even been an interception. It hit the ground, but we couldn't get much going on the rushing attack. Our only player to have over 4 yards of carry and multiple carries was Todd Sibley at 4.6. I guess Keys was right at 4. But London couldn't get anything going. He did have a touchdown. Reynolds was under 4 yards of carry. So North Carolina did a great job shutting down our rushing attack, forcing us into long passing downs and letting C.J. Kirk make mistakes. He had 2 fumbles, of course, as well. One was on a sack that we recovered. And then, of course, the fumble late in the game when we were trying to mount a comeback drive. And Jake Keys, only 3 catches on the day. Paul Lease had 4. Reynolds had 4. Greer had a nice game, 3 catches. KJ Welsh was the real story in this one, though. 3 drops and just 1 catch. And one of his drops would have been what could have been a game-tying touchdown. Midway through the third quarter, we were down 14-6. C.J. Kirk threw his best pass of the day. K.J. Welsh was unable to hold in. So from the Eastern PA guy, K.J. Welsh, unable to make the plays happen. And the Panthers fall in this one. Antonio Greer, a couple of pancakes, nothing too exciting there. Defensively, one player that we have to shout out, Darion Mitchell. He's a guy that has been a real underachiever for us. In both of the off seasons, he's had only +4 or +3 growth after coming in as a very highly rated 4-star recruit. He's only gone up to 83 overall. He's had the talent, though, and he finally put it together in this one. 10 tackles, 6 for loss, and a sack. He was absolutely incredible. And it was crazy. He was all over the field. You guys saw me pointing it out during the commentary. He was unbelievable. He made every play for us. He was all over the field. Carlson, of course, was good from the middle linebacker position, but it's not often your outside linebacker is able to have such an impact on the game, and he did it in this one. It was just a ridiculous performance from a Darion Mitchell and a great show that he was able to put on. So very, very nice job by our junior outside linebacker to have such a great showing for us. Also have to credit Malachi Bordeaux, a couple of sacks in this one. Quell Hampshire had a sack, played very, very well, forced a fumble as well. He's been a guy that really unheralded. He was going to be a backup safety, and I just thought, he's got the size, he's got the coverage ability. Let's make him our coverage outside linebacker, and he was incredible. He's been fantastic all season. Great game in this one, and, helped contribute to a strong defensive effort in spite of the fact that we weren't able to come away with the victory. Johnny Midday actually missed his first kick of the season. His first field goal of the season, as we tried him from 50+ to try and cut into the UNC advantage, unable to hit that one, but it is what it is. Zach Anderson, of course, transferred from Michigan after he lost the starting job to Steve Tate, and he had a very good game. Managed the game very well, kept plays alive with his legs, which was very impressive. He did have the 1 fumble, of course, that we were able to take the football away. O'Donnell, they rode him all game. 27 carries, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's not often that you see the CPU just go back to their running game and go back to the well and continue just ground and pounding 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but they did it in this one today. Gerard Wade, I thought was going to be more of a factor. He did have a big 41-yard diving grab that was fantastic, but for a guy that's going to go in the NFL draft this year, they should have been feeding him the football a bit more. 3 catches, still not a bad performance for him on the day, and really we should have shut them down even more. We had a couple of missed tackles that gave big gains. I remember a couple of them. Barry Williams had a big gain from the tight end position. Sam O'Donnell had a couple of big runs up the middle where we just missed tackles that we should have made, and they led to kind of our demise defensively. On the offensive side, or on the defensive side for North Carolina, our offensive side, Paris Fontenot, very good. Williams had that interception as well that I thought was ridiculous. It looked like it hit the ground to me. That's one of those ones where it just suctions into their hands. I thought with the challenge we might actually even get it, but unfortunately not able to make the play there. And A.J. Williams, big day for him, had a pick, deflection, forced a fumble as well. They did have 2 fumbles forced, only one of them was recovered, but a huge day for him defensively. In North Carolina, they just shut us down. You have to say they played very good coverage. We weren't able to get much going in the aerial attack. And Kirk, he did a nice job staying in the pocket, didn't scramble too much, but we just weren't able to find those open receivers, get the big plays, and when we did have a couple of opportunities, we let them slip right through our fingers. So with the loss, we fall to 8-3 on the season. Miami beats Virginia. They go to 6-1 alongside North Carolina, as is Virginia Tech, who beat ECU in a non-conference game this week. NC State gets a big win over Louisville, 49-24. So salvaging a bit of respect in their season with wins over Army and Louisville in the last 2 weeks. And Syracuse, 42-35. They get a game-winning touchdown with 1:33 to play. A late pick 6 in the third quarter, keeping them in the football game. And the Orange go to 8-3, 5-2 in ACC play on the season. A great run for Syracuse bouncing back. Clemson also gets a win over Boston College, just wrapping up their ACC Atlantic Division crown with that win. Cincinnati, 55-17 blowout of UCF, so they continue to stake some big victories on their name to try and get themselves into the college football playoff. Penn State blows out Michigan State in a big game. USC, 34-24 victory over UCLA, clinches a berth in the Pac-12 championship and potentially trying to sneak their way into the college football playoff discussion if they can knock off Washington in that championship game. Michigan goes to 9-2 with a nice win over Army, who drops to 6-5. Florida beats Mizzou. Ohio State ends any hope that Indiana had for sneaking into the Big Ten championship game with a 42-21 blowout of the Hoosiers. Oklahoma State knocks off Kansas State. Arkansas State keeps winning as they beat Troy. Bama escapes Texas A&M 35-28. Washington goes to 10-1 with a victory over Oregon 38-26. Of course, Clemson, like we mentioned, beats Boston College 27-7. They dominated the Eagles to get a victory there. And on the recruiting front, Penn State, with their big victory over Michigan State, they clinched the signing of Pittsburgh area product Alonzo Meeks out of New Kensington, PA. It's a very good signing. He's a guy that I wish we would have gone after. We did get a huge cornerback, of course, in Jordan Murphy Jr., already signed with us very early in the season, so that kind of shifted our focus away from Meeks, but what a player. His man coverage is already very good, got great speed, his pursuit is good, his play recognition is good, he's a very smart player, okay size, 4-star cornerback that's going to be a very, very talented player for Penn State. Hopefully we can renew our series with them and see him down the line. Players of the week this week, Ricky Massey got a quarter of his yards in one game, 251 yards, 5 touchdowns in UTSA's victory over North Texas. I think Paul Johnson is their head coach, and so I believe they're probably running a triple option is where he's getting all those carries from, but a great game for him nonetheless. A.J. Williams wins Defensive ACC Player of the Week for his performance in the victory over Pitt, forced a fumble, pick, and a sack in that game. Edwin Baker with 4 touchdowns in NC State's blowout win over Louisville gets Offensive Player of the Week. Derek Muhammad, Maryland quarterback who we faced earlier in the season in a victory over Rutgers, 4-touchdown performance, ends up earning himself Big Ten Player of the Week honors. And John Jones, middle linebacker for Purdue, forces a couple of fumbles to get Big Ten Player of the Week honors. Independence, Marcus Bailey for BYU, 8 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown as they lost to Mississippi State. Good performance from him. In the MAC, you got Ryan Moore with a 6-touchdown performance for Buffalo as they beat Bowling Green. Matt Gaddis with a couple of picks for Northern Illinois as they knocked off Miami of Ohio. Pac-12, Julian Jackson, senior quarterback for Arizona State, 5-touchdown performance as they knocked off Utah. And Sean Freeman, junior defensive end for the Sun Devils, with a sack, forced a fumble, in their victory over the Utes. SEC Players of the Week, Robert Douglas, senior corner with 2 picks over Missouri, and Clint Franklin, what a game he put on. His passing was terrible, 13 of 31, 186 yards, but he did rush for 110 yards and put up a bunch of touchdowns in their win. And what a turn his season has taken. He's been very good rushing the football still, 67 yards a game, 10 touchdowns, but look at his passing numbers. 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year, 21 TDs, 11 interceptions this year. It's not often that you see a highly rated CPU quarterback have a nosedive in their stats. Typically in NCAA football, year over year, you see them continue to improve. Pretty incredible to see him take a turn for the worse in this one. And he was a Heisman favorite. I thought he was going to win the Heisman this year. Just not going to happen. It's basically a 3-horse race now. Huff, Young, and Coleman of USC. Taylor Coleman, 446-yard performance as they beat UCLA, getting his name back into Heisman contention. He could be a dark horse candidate depending on how he plays in the Pac-12 championship game. Coaches poll, not a lot of change there. The top 9 stays entirely the same, all victories or idle this week. Florida jumps in at number 10 because of your Pitt Panthers losing. We fall to number 16. North Carolina jumps up to 13 in the polls with their victory over us. Everybody else pretty much staying the same. Not a lot of movement there, maybe 1 or 2 jumps. Miami up to 21 with their victory over UVA as they go to 8-3. UCLA drops back to 22 after losing to USC, who's all the way up to number 11 in the polls. Florida State falls back to 23. Iowa State back in the polls at 24. Arkansas at 25 as Kansas State and Oregon fall out of the rankings. So you can see not a lot of movement as it goes on. But a big thing to pay attention to is this ACC Coastal Division race. And what's crazy is it's very easy to conceive a situation where Virginia Tech is 11-1 and not in the ACC championship game. If Pitt beats Miami and North Carolina beats, I believe Duke is their final conference game, regardless if Virginia Tech beats Virginia, North Carolina would win the Coastal because of their head-to-head victory over Virginia Tech. So Virginia Tech's going to be rooting for Miami in this one so that all 3 of those teams can finish 7-1 in conference. They'll all have beaten each other in a round-robin format. And then it would come down to the head-to-head tiebreaker, which I believe would go to Virginia Tech because they're holding it right now. So that's the thing to watch right now is the Hokies are rooting for Miami to beat Pitt so that all 3 of them will finish 7-1. North Carolina is rooting for Pitt. If Pitt beats Miami, North Carolina is going to win the Coastal because I don't foresee them losing to Duke. Over on the Atlantic side, Clemson is already in the conference championship game. They're just waiting to see who their foe will be. They lost to Virginia Tech earlier in the season. I'm sure they'd like a chance to avenge that defeat because they lost 41-21. And so if they can counter that, it'll be a great performance for Clemson. They'll basically be essentially undefeated again. Cincinnati's the real question mark, though. 6-0 in the American right now. If they win out, they will still play USF. That's their last game of the season for basically the American Conference Championship, even though they don't have a conference championship game. If they can win out, who knows? Should they get in the college football playoff? They didn't in real life, of course, with an undefeated season. This is a completely different universe, so maybe they'll get that opportunity. In the Big 12, Oklahoma's in the championship game already. Texas and Baylor will face off in their final conference game with the winner going to the conference championship game, similar to what we see in the Big 10 East. If Michigan beats Ohio State, they'll be in the Big 10 championship game. If Ohio State wins, they'll be in the Big 10 championship game. As with the Big 10 West, Nebraska and Iowa facing off with the winner going to the conference championship game. So it's crazy. In the Big 10, we basically have 2 conference championship play-in games before the conference championship game the week after. So that's a pretty crazy stretch of games there. Interesting to see how that shakes out. Notre Dame, best of the independents at 9-2. Even if they beat USC in their final game of the season, I don't see them getting into the college football playoff with 2 losses and no conference championship game. In the MAC, Central Michigan looks like the favorite there. The Mountain West, Utah State, Air Force, Boise, all still technically in the running for the Mountain title, though you'd expect Utah State to get it based on head-to-head performance unless they lose their final game because they beat Air Force, I think they did, and Boise, so they cannot lose the Mountain Division crown. Over in the West Division, Fresno and San Jose State. San Jose State has been the better team. Look at their point spread. They've been so much better, but they lost head-to-head to Fresno State. So unless Fresno loses their final conference game and San Jose State wins, it's going to be Fresno in the championship game there. Pac-12 North already clinched by Washington by virtue of the fact that they beat Stanford earlier in the season. So even if they lost to Wazoo, they'll still be in. USC is in. All they have left is a non-conference game versus Notre Dame to finish out their schedule. And the Trojans possibly with an opportunity to make a claim for the college football playoff if they can knock off both Notre Dame and Washington. They'll have a great stretch of wins at the end of their schedule. Florida lost to Tennessee, so more than likely, unless Tennessee suffers some sort of upset loss to Kentucky in their final game of the regular season, you would expect Tennessee to be in the SEC championship game, as would you expect Ole Miss. They have a tough ranked battle against a very good Mississippi State team that if they lose that one, you could see Alabama potentially make it into the conference championship game because you'll have Ole Miss, Bama, and Arkansas all tied at 6-2 if they can all win their final game of the season. And then who knows what will happen there, because same thing. They'll have, similar to the ACC Coastal Division, all three of them will have beaten each other at some point this season. Arkansas State does have a matchup remaining with both Texas State and Louisiana Lafayette, so the winners of those games would essentially win the Sun Belt. So a nice little look around the national landscape to see that there is still a ton to play for in the final couple weeks of the regular season leading into conference championship week. And some big rivalry matchups here. Boston College, Syracuse, a nice old Big East matchup taking each other on. Virginia Tech versus Virginia, rivalry matchup. You'd expect Virginia Tech to win, but still going to be a good game. Georgia Tech, Georgia, both teams looking to salvage what's left of their campaigns. NC State, Wake Forest in a nice little North Carolina battle. Florida, Florida State, of course, a huge rivalry matchup. South Carolina, Clemson. Basically, South Carolina looking to play spoiler and knock Clemson out of the playoff. And Duke, North Carolina. Remember, it all comes down to Miami, Pitt, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Duke, North Carolina. How those games shake out will determine which of the three schools, Miami, Virginia Tech, or North Carolina, will get into the ACC championship game, with the most likely candidates being Virginia Tech and UNC. Cincinnati looking to continue their undefeated campaign against a team we played earlier in the season and gave us some trouble, Temple. They do have an explosive offense to watch out for, but I think Cincinnati wins in this one. Ohio State versus Michigan. The game. What more can you say about it? The big game between these two rivals, heated, and Ohio State looking like the better team on paper, but Michigan's aerial attack has been so good. One of the best passing offenses in the entire country against one of the best defenses in the country in Ohio State. That's going to be the big showdown to determine who wins this matchup. Tennessee versus Kentucky. I mean, it's a good SEC matchup. Kentucky, they have a good offense. Maybe they can surprise someone. They are at home, so they'll have that crowd behind them, but I'd expect the Vols to win this one. Indiana against Penn State should be a fun matchup. Arkansas State, Louisiana Lafayette, of course, is basically a Sun Belt play-in for the championship game. Florida State, Florida is just another rivalry game. Florida, if they get the win over Florida State here and then they win the SEC championship, if they can get into it, should Tennessee be upset, maybe they can sneak their way into the college football playoff with 2 losses. So definitely a lot still on the line for the Gators in this one. Baylor, Texas, it's a Big 12 championship play-in game. Both teams 6-1. The winner of this game will go face Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship. So either team could come out with this one. Texas has been the better team. They've got the more talent, but Baylor was missing their starting quarterback, Adam Harper, for a few weeks this season. That definitely hurt them. So with him back and healthy, they could definitely give Texas a run for their money. Oklahoma just looking to finish an undefeated season, and I think if they win out regardless of what happens in the Big 12 championship game, they're probably a shoo-in for the college football playoff. If they can beat last year's semifinalist West Virginia, then I think they'll have earned that college football playoff bid. Iron Bowl, of course, Alabama just looking to keep their slim hopes for an SEC title alive after winning the college football playoff last year. LSU won the college football playoff 2 years ago. Remember, they're taking on Arkansas in this one. If LSU beats Arkansas, it clinches the SEC West for Ole Miss and will eliminate Alabama. So LSU will want to knock their rival out there. Notre Dame USC, an incredible late non-conference showdown. USC, if they can go to 10-2 and give themselves an opportunity to play number 3 Washington in the Pac-12 championship game with just 2 losses, who knows what could be said for the Trojans' opportunities at the college football playoff in this one. But Notre Dame looking to play spoiler and continue. They have the number one passing attack in the country with transfer quarterback Ben Guidry at the helm. Ole Miss looking to seal their berth into the SEC championship game with a win in the Egg Bowl against rival Mississippi State. Both teams with very different offenses. You can see Mississippi State loves to pound the rock. Ole Miss loves to air it out with Dustin Young. So that'll be a great showdown between those teams with two very different philosophies on offense. Pitt, Miami, senior day at Heinz Field. These Pitt Panthers, a bit of a disappointing campaign. Of course, we knew there was going to be some struggles with the turnover at the quarterback position, the loss of Kenny Pickett. And this Pitt team is going to be saying goodbye to a ton of seniors, 19 seniors on the roster this season. So there's going to be a lot of turnover going into next year. Of course, you'll have C.J. Kirk, the starting quarterback, returning, Davion Reynolds returning, but there's some big question marks. Some rumblings have been going around about Jay Keys, the Panthers' star wide receiver, as well as strong safety Avery Heller, the junior, who's been very, very impressive, leads the team in tackles, led them in tackles last year, won a bunch of national awards last year. He's had a bit of a regression this year, but he's still a fantastic player. So question marks abound for both of those guys as to whether they'll return for their senior year. I think Keys is more than likely a guy who will step to the next level. He's already proven he's that good, but Heller's a big question mark. If he goes, that's going to be a lot of talent that the Panthers will need to replace for next year. And they're going up in this game against a very impressive offensive attack. Travis Bolden, 32 touchdowns against just 7 interceptions. He's been missing one of his top targets for the entire season, David Franklin, who was very good last year. He got injured in the second game of the year, and he's been out all year, and Bolden's been putting up these numbers even without one of his best targets that he has available to him, because of the fact that this Miami team is very, very talented. I mean, you look at their roster, it's no surprise that they're still in the hunt for the ACC title. The big question is that they lost a couple of non-conference games earlier in the season that were a bit questionable. They lost to some struggling opponents, and if they'd have won those games, they'd have been definitely in the hunt for the college football playoff as well. 2 non-conference losses for the Hurricanes. So if they did not have those, who knows where they'd be at this point in the season. But Bolden, his first year as a starter, as a junior, he's been incredible. 3 rushing touchdowns as well. He's a huge body. He's got decent speed, enough to keep plays alive, but he loves to sit in the pocket and just pick teams apart, even though he does have the speed to avoid the traffic. They have Andrew Ruffin, who's sitting out this year as a transfer, as well as Peters, who are guys that will be groomed for a couple years down the road to be Bolden's successor and keep up that Miami tradition at quarterback that they've had throughout the course of this dynasty with some very impressive performances. Tavon Murphy, solid player here as just a junior. I think he'll be very impressive even next year when he gets into his senior year. He's a very good player. Bobby Siegel behind him as well. A couple of speed guys, and that's areas where the Panthers have struggled, is guys that can run around their defense can definitely make big things happen. And even though Miami's missing David Franklin, they have 2 spectacular senior receivers in Derek Sisk. He's had a bit of a regression this year, even though the Miami passing attack's been very good. Only 47 grabs on the season so far. His yards per game has actually gone up, but otherwise maybe a bit of a regression because Adrian Randall's taken a bigger helm of the offense. 18 yards per grab and 8 touchdowns for the senior receiver. Great player, and one that we'll definitely have to watch out for today. Travis Simpson, the sophomore's also made a couple of steps forward, 4 catches for him. Brandon Joseph as well, a guy who's finally gotten to see some game action as a true sophomore. Brandon Steele. They love a couple of Brandons who are very, very talented out there. They also have Kyle Mills, the senior tight end, who's a very, very solid player. I keep adding emphasis to that of how very good they are, just because it's a true fact. This Miami team is sensational. Look at their offensive line. Patrick Boyd is going to be an NFL player. Todd Harris is going to be an NFL player. Gary McLeod is going to be an NFL player. Chad Wright could make an NFL roster. Their entire offensive line is sensational. They're very, very talented. It's going to make things tough. We've seen a bit of a regression from this Pitt defensive line as well, with their ability to get after the quarterback. Only led by 6 sacks this year. Remember last year, Darren Toth, I think, had 18 sacks. Sean Wolfgang had 16 sacks. So the 2 of them combined for more sacks than the Panthers have as an entire team this year. That's how good that their defensive line has been over the past few years. Jalen Hills leads the team in sacks. He's only got 6 on the season right now. So a big regression from the Panthers, and I don't expect them to get a ton of opportunities to get after the quarterback this week because of how good the Miami the Miami offensive line is. So it's really going to make this a challenge. Miami's been good all season. The Panthers' talent, they have the ability to shut down this Miami team, as well as they have playmakers who can make big plays for them. The question is, can they put it all together? You've had guys that have talented pedigrees and are very good and just have not put things together this season. Benjamin Ogden, he's a guy that I expected him to break out this season. I thought with his speed, his physical tools, he'd be fantastic. He's just really underwhelmed so far for the Panthers this season. Can he make a big day on senior night? Can Antonio Greer put his drops aside and have a big day? Can Jay Keys get back to the forefront? Remember, he only had 3 tackles last game, or 3 receptions last game. They need him to be a bit more of a factor for the Panthers to have an opportunity to come away with a victory here against a very talented Miami squad. Guys to watch out for: Chad Bailey defensively. He's going to be playing on Sundays next year. He's got fantastic speed. He gets after the football, and he can defend players in deep coverage. He's a fantastic player and one that could really make the difference. Remember, we saw Paris Fontenot for USC last week making some big plays. Bailey is that guy for Miami here on this offense. And they got a great kicker, Jeremy Singleton, as well. 16 of 25 last year, 15 of 17 this year. One of the best kickers in the country, 88% accuracy. He's definitely a guy to watch out for. If Miami gets a big clutch kick late in the game, he can definitely knock it through. So it's going to be a great matchup. Let me know in the comments. Some big games this week. Baylor, Texas. Who wins that one as the plan for the Big 12 championship game? Who makes the ACC championship game? Is it Virginia Tech? Is it North Carolina? Is it Miami? As what's the final score going to be when your Panthers take on the Hurricanes at Heinz Field? So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.